Welcome back where we dive deep into the darkest corners of gaming's most haunting worlds. Before we begin tonight's journey into the twisted shores of Bloodborne's most tragic tale, if you're finding comfort in these lore explorations, a quick subscribe really helps the channel grow more than you might think. It's the best way to support these deep dives into gaming's greatest mysteries. Tonight we voyage to one of the most sorrowful and terrifying locations in all of Yharnam's blood-soaked history. We're exploring the fishing Hamlet, a cursed coastal village where ancient sins cast shadows that stretch across time itself, where the cries of the innocent still echo through nightmare realms, and where the very concept of justice became twisted into something far more terrible than any crime it sought to punish. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin this journey to the shores of tragedy, where the waves still carry the weight of ancient grief, and the very sand remembers the blood that was spilled upon it. Chapter 1. The Ancient Shores. Long before Yharnam became the gothic nightmare we know, before the healing church rose to power, before the first hunter ever lifted blade against beast, there existed a small coastal settlement known simply as the Fishing Hamlet. This village, perched on rocky cliffs above a dark and mysterious sea, seemed unremarkable to any casual observer. Its inhabitants were simple folk, fishermen, their families, and those who made their living from the bounty of the ocean. But the sea that lapped against the hamlet's shores was no ordinary body of water. These were cosmic depths, vast expanses that touched realms beyond human comprehension. In these waters dwelt beings of such immense power and alien intelligence that the very concepts of space and time bent around their presence. Among these ancient entities was one who would come to play a central role in our tragic tale, the Great One, known as Kos. Kos was unlike the other cosmic beings that lurked in the depths of space and dream. Where many Great Ones were distant and incomprehensible, Kos possessed something that could almost be called maternal instinct. She had formed a connection with the people of the fishing hamlet, watching over them with the protective care of a being who understood, in her cosmic way, the fragility and preciousness of mortal life. The villagers, for their part, had developed a relationship with their oceanic guardian that was part reverence, part symbiosis. They understood that the sea provided for them not merely through natural abundance, but through the benevolent oversight of something far greater than themselves. Their fishing was not just about survival, but about maintaining a delicate balance with forces that could grant prosperity or unleash devastation with equal ease. In the deeper waters beyond the hamlet's immediate shores, Kos moved through realms that existed simultaneously in the physical ocean and in dimensions that human minds could not properly grasp. Her presence transformed the very nature of the water around her, infusing it with properties that blurred the line between the material and the spiritual. Fish caught in these waters carried traces of cosmic influence, sustaining the villagers not just physically, but connecting them, in small ways, to the greater mysteries of existence. The architecture of the fishing hamlet reflected this relationship with the cosmic sea. Houses were built not just to withstand ocean storms, but to harmonize with forces that operated beyond conventional weather patterns. Windows faced the water in configurations that had been passed down through generations, positioning that allowed the inhabitants to observe the subtle signs that indicated Kos's moods and movements. Religious practices in the hamlet centered around gratitude and respect for the sea's bounty. These were not elaborate rituals, but simple acknowledgements of the relationship between the village and its cosmic benefactor. Fishermen would leave offerings of their finest catch at designated spots along the shoreline. Children learned songs that, while they sounded like simple folk melodies, actually carried tonal patterns that resonated with cosmic frequencies. The village elder, a weathered man whose family had lived in the hamlet for countless generations, served as the primary interpreter of Kos's will. He could read the patterns of the waves, the color of the water, the behavior of sea life, translating these signs into guidance for the community's daily activities. His wisdom was not academic knowledge, but intuitive understanding, built up through decades of careful observation and inherited wisdom. Life in the fishing hamlet moved in rhythms that reflected both the natural cycles of the ocean and the deeper pulses of cosmic time. Seasons were marked, not just by weather changes, but by subtle shifts in the cosmic energies that flowed through their waters. The villagers had learned to adapt their activities to these cycles, knowing when the sea was most generous and when it required periods of respectful withdrawal. Trade with the outside world was limited and carefully managed. The villagers were protective of their relationship with Kos, understanding instinctively that excessive outside attention could disrupt the delicate balance they had achieved. Visitors were welcomed with traditional hospitality, but there were unspoken boundaries, areas of the shoreline and certain practices that remained private to the community. The hamlet's isolation was both geographic and temporal. While the rest of the world moved forward with the relentless pace of human progress, the village existed in a kind of timeless bubble where ancient ways of life continued undisturbed. This isolation would prove to be both blessing and curse, protecting the villagers from external conflicts, while making them vulnerable to those who would eventually seek to exploit their cosmic connections. Children born in the fishing hamlet grew up with an intuitive understanding of the sea's mysteries that would seem supernatural to outsiders. They could predict weather changes days in advance, sense the approach of dangerous marine life, and sometimes dream dreams that seemed to come from the depths of the ocean itself. These abilities were considered normal parts of childhood development, as natural as learning to walk or speak. The village's relationship with Kos was not without its complexities. While the Great One's protection was genuine, her cosmic nature meant that her understanding of human needs and desires was filtered through an alien perspective. Sometimes her gifts came with unexpected consequences, or her protection manifested in ways that created new challenges, even as it solved existing problems. But for generations, this relationship had been stable and mutually beneficial. The villagers lived peaceful, prosperous lives, and Kos found in their community something that satisfied some deep cosmic need, perhaps the closest thing to family that a being of her nature could achieve in a universe of infinite loneliness. Chapter 2. The Great One's Blessing. In the deepest waters beyond the fishing hamlet, where the ocean floor dropped away into abyssal depths that seemed to have no bottom, Kos had made her domain. Here, in a space that existed between the physical and the metaphysical, she moved through waters that were simultaneously liquid and dream, substance and concept. Her form was both magnificent and terrible, a being of such cosmic scale that her true nature could barely be comprehended by minds evolved to understand only the immediate and material. To the villagers, Kos appeared in glimpses and suggestions rather than direct revelation. Sometimes fishermen would see what looked like a vast shadow moving beneath their boats, a presence so enormous that it could only be a small portion of something unimaginably large. Other times, the water itself would take on properties that spoke of her influence, becoming luminous with bioluminescence that formed patterns too complex to be natural, or flowing in currents that seemed to respond to emotions rather than physical forces. Kos's blessing upon the fishing hamlet manifested in countless small miracles that became so commonplace, the villagers almost took them for granted. Storms would part around the village, leaving destruction in their wake. Along the coastline, while the hamlet remained untouched, fish would practically leap into the villagers' nets, not from any compulsion, but as if they too understood their role in the cosmic relationship that sustained the community. The children of the hamlet were particularly blessed by Kos's influence. They grew up healthy and strong, with an intuitive understanding of the ocean that went far beyond anything that could be taught. Young ones who fell into the water never drowned. The currents would carry them gently back to shore, as if the sea itself refused to harm them. Minor injuries healed with remarkable speed when treated with seawater from certain tidal pools that glowed faintly under moonlight. But perhaps the greatest of Kos's blessings was the gift of dreams. Villagers would sometimes experience visions during sleep that provided practical guidance for their daily lives. A fisherman might dream of a specific location where unusual catches awaited. A mother might receive warnings about impending dangers to her family. The village elders' dreams were particularly significant, often containing guidance for community decisions or interpretations of cosmic events that affected the hamlet's well-being. These dream communications were not one-sided. The villagers' own dreams, their hopes and fears and daily experiences, somehow reached Coles as well. Through this unconscious communion, the Great One gained insight into human nature that most cosmic beings never achieved. She learned about love and loss, about the small joys and sorrows that defined mortal existence, about the fierce protective instincts that drove parents to sacrifice for their children. It was through this dream connection that Coles began to understand the concept of family in ways that transcended her cosmic nature. The villagers' love for their children, their willingness to endure hardship for the sake of future generations, their grief when death claimed their loved ones. These emotions resonated with something deep within Coles' alien psychology, awakening feelings that were both foreign and familiar. The physical transformation of the Hamlet under Coles' influence was subtle but profound. Buildings seemed to weather storms better than their construction should have allowed. Gardens grew with unusual abundance, producing varieties of plants that existed nowhere else along the coast. The very stones of the shoreline became smooth and comfortable, as if shaped by countless years of gentle currents. Even the local wildlife reflected Coles' blessing. Seabirds nested in the village without fear of human interference, somehow understanding that this was a place of sanctuary. Marine life in the Hamlet's waters was more diverse and abundant than in surrounding areas, with species that displayed unusual intelligence and apparent awareness of their role in the larger ecosystem. The village's nets and boats, blessed by years of contact with cosmic waters, developed properties that went beyond their original materials. Nets woven from ordinary fibers became incredibly durable and seemed to attract fish rather than simply catching them. Boats carved from local wood gained an almost supernatural seaworthiness, remaining stable in conditions that should have capsized them. Time itself seemed to flow differently in the fishing hamlet. While the rest of the world aged and changed according to the normal passage of years, the village existed in a kind of temporal eddy where change came slowly and gently. Elders lived to remarkable ages while retaining their vitality, and the accumulated wisdom of generations remained fresh and relevant across decades. The cosmic energies that flowed through the hamlet's waters had effects that extended beyond the immediate practical benefits. Children born under particularly strong cosmic influences sometimes developed abilities that bordered on the supernatural, an uncanny ability to predict weather, an almost telepathic connection with marine life, or dreams that seemed to provide glimpses of distant places and events. These gifts were never frightening or overwhelming. Coles' influence shaped them to be harmonious with human nature, enhancements rather than disruptions to normal life. A child who could sense the emotions of sea creatures used this ability to become an exceptional fisherman. A young woman whose dreams sometimes showed her distant storms became the village's weather predictor. The religious practices that developed around Coles' blessing were characterized by their simplicity and sincerity. There were no elaborate temples or complex rituals, no priesthood demanding sacrifice or worship. Instead, the villagers' relationship with their cosmic protector was expressed through daily acts of gratitude and respect, offerings of their finest catch, songs of appreciation sung to the evening tide, and communal gatherings where stories of Coles' benevolence were shared. Chapter 3. The Scholar's Discovery. Far from the peaceful shores of the fishing hamlet, in the ivy-covered halls of Byrgenwerth College, a different kind of relationship with the cosmic was taking shape. While the villagers lived in harmonious symbiosis with Coles, the scholars of Byrgenwerth approached the mysteries of the universe with the analytical detachment of academic inquiry. Where the hamlet sought balance, Byrgenwerth sought knowledge. Where the villagers offered gratitude, the scholars demanded answers. Master Willem, the college's visionary leader, had long theorized about the existence of higher dimensional beings that influence the material world from realms beyond human perception. His studies of ancient texts and archaeological artifacts had led him to believe that contact with these entities, which he termed Great Ones, represented the next stage of human evolution. But theories, no matter how elegant, required empirical evidence to be transformed into scientific fact. It was during one of the college's deep-sea expeditions that the first concrete evidence of Great One activity was discovered, a research vessel, equipped with the most advanced diving and sampling equipment available, had been conducting surveys along remote coastal areas, searching for traces of the cosmic influences that Willem's theories predicted. The expedition's findings in most locations had been disappointingly mundane: unusual mineral deposits that suggested deep Earth activity, marine life with interesting but explicable mutations, and electromagnetic anomalies that could be attributed to natural geological processes. But as the expedition approached the waters near the fishing hamlet, their instruments began registering readings that defied conventional explanation. Water samples contained organic compounds that shouldn't exist in nature, arranged in molecular patterns that suggested intelligence behind their formation. Electromagnetic readings showed fluctuations that followed mathematical sequences too complex to be random. Most intriguingly, several crew members reported dreams of unprecedented vividity and apparent meaning during the nights they spent anchored in these waters. The expedition leader, a promising young scholar named Mikolash, not Mikolash, like Kolash, recognized the significance of these findings immediately. Here was the evidence that Willem had been seeking, proof that cosmic forces were actively operating in the material world. The discovery would make the expedition's reputation and advance human understanding of the universe's fundamental nature. But as the scholars investigated further, they realized that their instruments were only detecting the periphery of something far larger and more significant. The cosmic activity they were measuring wasn't random or sporadic. It was centered on something specific, something that existed in these waters, with purpose and intelligence. Following their readings like a treasure map, the expedition gradually homed in on the source of the cosmic emissions. What they found defied their wildest expectations. Deep beneath the ocean's surface, in a space that seemed to exist partially outside normal, three-dimensional reality, they discovered the form of Kos herself. The Great One's physical presence was unlike anything in their experience. Vast beyond measurement, beautiful beyond description, and so fundamentally alien that their minds could only process fragments of her true appearance at any given moment. But even as the scholars marveled at their discovery, they realized something that would change the entire nature of their expedition. Kos was not simply existing in these waters, she was dying. The cosmic being who had protected and nurtured the fishing hamlet for generations was in the process of bringing new life into the universe, and the effort was consuming her very essence. The Great One was pregnant. This revelation transformed the scholars' scientific expedition into something approaching a pilgrimage. They were witnessing what might be the rarest event in cosmic history, the birth of a new Great One. The implications were staggering. If they could study this process, document it, perhaps even influence it, they would gain insights into the fundamental nature of existence itself. The knowledge they could derive from this single event could advance human understanding by centuries or millennia. Master Willem, when informed of the discovery via the expedition's communication equipment, was beside himself with excitement. Here was vindication of every theory he had proposed, evidence that would silence his critics and establish Byrgenwerth as the foremost center of cosmic research in the world. But more than academic triumph, this represented an opportunity to guide humanity toward its next evolutionary phase through direct contact with beings who had already achieved transcendence. The scholars' approach to Kos was methodical and, they believed, respectful. They established a research station in the deeper waters around her resting place, using the most advanced equipment available to monitor her condition and document the miraculous process they were witnessing. Their instruments detected cosmic energies that fluctuated in patterns that suggested not just biological processes, but something approaching conscious thought on a scale that encompassed entire dimensions. As their study progressed, the scholars began to understand that Kos's pregnancy was not merely a biological function, but a cosmic event that was reshaping the fundamental nature of the space around her. The waters themselves were becoming something new, imbued with properties that blurred the line between matter and consciousness. Marine life in the area was evolving at an accelerated pace, developing characteristics that suggested increasing intelligence and awareness. The scholars documented these changes with scientific precision, creating detailed records of every measurable parameter. They collected specimens, recorded visual observations, and attempted to establish communication protocols that might allow them to interact directly with the Great One. Their excitement grew as they realized they were documenting not just a birth, but the creation of what amounted to a new dimension of existence. But in their academic enthusiasm, the scholars failed to appreciate the significance of something they had observed, but not fully investigated. Their instruments had detected the presence of the fishing hamlet and its inhabitants, noting the unusual electromagnetic signatures that suggested cosmic influence. However, they had categorized this as secondary phenomenon, interesting but not central to their primary research focus. The villagers, for their part, were aware of the scholars' presence. The sudden change in Kos's condition, her withdrawal from active communication with the hamlet, and the appearance of strange vessels in their waters had not gone unnoticed, but they approached the situation with the patience and respect that characterized their relationship with all cosmic matters, waiting for clearer signs of what their response should be. The village elder's dreams during this period were troubled and confusing. Instead of the clear guidance he was accustomed to receiving, he experienced fragmented visions of vast spaces, overwhelming emotions, and a sense of approaching change that was both wonderful and terrifying. He counseled the villagers to maintain their normal routines while remaining alert for signs of what Kos might need from them during this cosmic transition. As the scholars' research progressed, they began to realize that Kos's pregnancy was nearing its culmination. The cosmic energies surrounding her were building towards some kind of climactic event, and their instruments suggested that the birth of the new Great One was imminent. This realization filled them with anticipation and anxiety in equal measure. They were about to witness something that no human had ever seen, but they had no framework for understanding what they should expect or how they should respond. Chapter 4: The Hamlet's Symbiosis. While the scholars of Byrgenwerth studied Kos from their research vessels, cataloguing cosmic phenomena with scientific detachment, the villagers of the fishing hamlet were experiencing the Great One's pregnancy in an entirely different way. To them, this was not an academic curiosity, but a profoundly personal event that affected every aspect of their daily lives. They felt Kos's condition not as external observers, but as family members sharing in both the joy and the burden of bringing new life into existence. The changes in the village began subtly. Fishermen noticed that their catches were becoming increasingly unusual, not just in abundance but in the types of creatures that appeared in their nets. Species that had never been seen in these waters before began appearing regularly. Marine life that displayed characteristics suggesting intelligence and awareness far beyond normal animal behavior. Fish seemed to arrange themselves in patterns that resembled communication, and some creatures appeared to be observing the villagers as much as being observed. The dreams that had always been a part of life in the fishing hamlet became more intense and meaningful. Instead of the gentle guidance and practical insights that villagers were accustomed to receiving, their sleep was filled with visions of vast underwater spaces, of cosmic forces moving with purpose beyond human comprehension, and of an approaching moment that would change everything. These dreams were not frightening, but overwhelming in their emotional intensity, filled with a mixture of anticipation, joy, and an underlying current of protective concern. The village elder found himself serving not just as an interpreter of cosmic signs, but as a counselor, helping the community process experiences that lay beyond their normal frame of reference. His own dreams had become so vivid and complex that he sometimes found it difficult to distinguish between visions and waking consciousness. Through careful meditation and consultation with the community's accumulated wisdom, he gradually began to understand that they were all participating in something unprecedented, the birth of a new cosmic consciousness. The physical environment of the hamlet was also transforming in response to Kos's condition. Tidal pools that had always been sources of healing water now glowed with intensified bioluminescence, creating natural light sources that pulsed in rhythm, with cycles that seemed to correspond to cosmic rather than terrestrial time. Plants in the village gardens began producing flowers of colors that had no names, cues that seemed to shift and change depending on the observer's emotional state. The villagers' own abilities were enhanced during this period. Their intuitive understanding of marine life deepened to the point where they could almost communicate telepathically with sea creatures. Weather prediction became so accurate, it seemed like precognition rather than observation. Some individuals began experiencing moments of expanded awareness, where they could sense events occurring in distant locations, or perceive the emotional states of people far from the village. But perhaps the most significant change was the development of what could only be described as a collective consciousness within the community. Villagers began to share dreams and visions, finding that their individual experiences of cosmic contact were part of a larger pattern that encompassed the entire hamlet. Decisions that had once required lengthy community discussions now seemed to emerge spontaneously from a shared understanding that developed without formal communication. This enhanced community awareness allowed the villagers to coordinate their response to Kos's pregnancy in ways that supported both their cosmic protector and their own well-being. They intuitively understood when to increase their offerings to the sea, when to modify their fishing practices to avoid disturbing sensitive areas, and when to gather for communal ceremonies that seemed to provide comfort and strength to their Great One Guardian. The relationship between the village and Kos during this period became even more intimate and personal, where once the Great One's presence had been a benevolent but distant force, now the villagers could sense her individual personality, her hopes and fears regarding the new life she was bringing into existence, and her gratitude for their continued support and understanding. They felt her protective love for her unborn child and her determination to ensure that the new Great One would enter existence in an environment of safety and acceptance. The scholars' research activities, conducted in the deeper waters beyond the village's immediate vicinity, created a source of concern for the hamlet's inhabitants. While they could not directly observe the Byrgenwerth expedition, the villagers could sense that their cosmic protector was being subjected to scrutiny and analysis that felt intrusive and potentially harmful. The presence of the research vessels created disturbances in the cosmic energies that flowed through their waters, disrupting patterns that had remained stable for generations. Community discussions during this period focused on how they could best support Kos during what was clearly a vulnerable time. Some villagers advocated for direct contact with the scholars, hoping to explain the situation and request that the research be conducted with greater sensitivity. Others felt that any interference with the cosmic birth process could have unpredictable consequences, and that their role should be limited to maintaining their traditional practices of support and protection. The village elder's guidance during these discussions was influenced by dreams that seemed to come directly from Kos herself. Through these visions, he gained the impression that the Great One was aware of the scholars' presence and had initially welcomed their interest as a sign of human evolution toward greater cosmic awareness. However, as the research progressed and the birth approached, her priorities were shifting toward protecting her offspring, and she was becoming increasingly concerned about the implications of external interference. As Kos's pregnancy neared its culmination, the intensity of cosmic activity around the fishing hamlet reached levels that were impossible to ignore. The northern lights, rarely visible at their latitude, appeared nightly in displays of unprecedented brilliance and complexity. Tides followed patterns that had no correlation with lunar cycles, rising and falling according to rhythms that seemed to echo the Great One's vital signs. The very air seemed to shimmer with energy that was visible to the naked eye, creating atmospheric effects that transformed mundane landscapes into scenes of otherworldly beauty. The villagers understood that they were approaching a moment of supreme cosmic significance, an event that would fundamentally alter their relationship with the universe and their place within it. They prepared for this moment, not with anxiety, but with the reverent anticipation of witnesses to a miracle, knowing that they had been privileged to participate in something that occurred perhaps once in the history of existence itself. Their preparations were both practical and spiritual. Food stores were organized to support the community through whatever changes might come. Ceremonies were planned to welcome the new Great One and to express the village's gratitude for Kos's trust in allowing them to witness the birth. Most importantly, they prepared themselves emotionally and psychologically for the profound transformations that they sensed were approaching. The scholars, focused on their instruments and measurements, remained largely unaware of the human dimension of the cosmic event they were studying. They understood that a Great One birth was imminent and had positioned their equipment to record every possible aspect of the phenomenon, but they failed to appreciate that their research acts were not just cosmic entities, but individuals with personal relationships, emotions, and protective instincts that would profoundly influence their response to any perceived threats to their offspring. Chapter 5. The Birth of the Orphan. In the deepest hours of a night, when the very stars seemed to pulse with anticipation, the cosmic event that had been building for months finally reached its climactic moment. The birth of Kos's child was not merely a biological process, but a fundamental restructuring of reality itself. An event so profound that its effects rippled across multiple dimensions of existence simultaneously. The villagers of the fishing hamlet, connected to their cosmic protector through bonds that transcended physical space, experienced the birth as if they were all participants in the miraculous process. The first sign that the moment had arrived came through the enhanced dream connection that the villagers shared with Kos. Across the hamlet, people woke simultaneously from sleep, all reporting the same vision: vast underwater spaces filled with light that had no earthly equivalent, cosmic forces moving with purpose and intention, and an overwhelming sense of joy mixed with exhaustion that could only belong to a mother in the final stages of bringing new life into existence. The village elder, whose dreams had become increasingly vivid throughout Kos's pregnancy, experienced the birth with such intensity that he seemed to be present in the cosmic spaces where it was occurring. Through his visions, he could see the new Great One emerging into existence, a being of impossible beauty and power, yet unmistakably young and vulnerable, requiring protection and guidance as it learned to navigate the complexities of cosmic consciousness. The physical manifestations of the birth were extraordinary. The ocean around the fishing hamlet began to glow with bioluminescence, so intense it turned night into day, creating patterns of light that seemed to celebrate the arrival of the new cosmic being. Waves rose and fell in rhythm with what could only be the breathing of the newborn Great One, while marine life throughout the area exhibited behaviors that suggested they were responding to some form of cosmic communication. The scholars of Byrgenwerth, positioned in their research vessels to observe and document the phenomenon, found their instruments overwhelmed by the cosmic energies being released. Readings exceeded the maximum capabilities of their equipment, while cameras and recording devices captured images and sounds that seemed to exist partially outside normal three-dimensional space. The birth of a Great One, they realized, was not just a localized event, but something that affected the fundamental structure of reality itself. But what the scholars witnessed through their instruments was only a fraction of the complete cosmic event. The true significance of the birth could only be understood by those who were connected to Kos through bonds of affection and mutual understanding. The villagers, through their enhanced dream connection, experienced the birth as a moment of supreme cosmic joy, the fulfillment of their Great One protector's deepest hopes and desires. The new Great One, who would later come to be known as the Orphan of Kos, possessed characteristics that reflected both its cosmic nature and its unique origin. Born from a Great One who had developed deep connections with mortal beings, the Orphan carried within its consciousness an understanding of human emotion and experience that was unprecedented among cosmic entities. It was, in essence, a bridge between the mortal and cosmic realms, embodying the possibility of genuine communication and understanding between radically different forms of consciousness. The Orphan's first moments of existence were spent in the protective embrace of its mother, learning to navigate consciousness that spanned multiple dimensions, while still maintaining coherence and individual identity. Kos, exhausted by the cosmic effort of bringing new life into existence, focused all her remaining energy on ensuring that her child would be safe and properly prepared for independent existence in a universe that could be both wondrous and dangerous. The villagers, witnessing this cosmic bonding through their dream connection, understood that they were observing something sacred and private. Their role was not to intrude upon this intimate family moment, but to provide a supportive presence that would help ensure the new Great One's successful transition into independent existence. They offered their love and acceptance to both mother and child, creating an emotional environment that would nurture the cosmic family during this vulnerable period. However, the scholars' presence during this sacred moment created complications that neither they nor the cosmic beings fully anticipated. From the Great One's perspective, the birth was occurring within the context of a supportive community that included both the mortal villagers and the academic observers. The distinction between those who were present out of love and those who were present out of scientific curiosity was not immediately apparent to cosmic consciousnesses that processed reality according to entirely different categories. The Byrgenwerth researchers, meanwhile, were so focused on documenting the unprecedented phenomena they were witnessing that they failed to appreciate the personal and emotional dimensions of what was occurring. To them, this was the discovery of a lifetime, an opportunity to study cosmic reproduction and potentially gain insights that would advance human understanding of the universe's fundamental nature. They recorded everything they could, collected samples of the transformed water and marine life, and made detailed observations of the cosmic energies that were reshaping the environment around them. The birth process itself lasted several hours, with cosmic energies building and subsiding in waves that corresponded to different phases of the Orphan's emergence into independent existence. During the most intense periods, reality itself seemed to become fluid, with the boundaries between physical and metaphysical space becoming permeable. The scholars found themselves experiencing moments of expanded awareness, where they could perceive dimensions of existence that normally lay beyond human perception. As the cosmic birth neared completion, both the villagers and the scholars sensed that a fundamental change was approaching. The intense energies that had been building throughout the process were beginning to stabilize, suggesting that the new Great One was successfully establishing its independent existence. The bioluminescence in the waters was shifting from the chaotic patterns of active birth to the more stable rhythms that would characterize the Orphan's ongoing presence in the cosmic ecosystem. But the completion of the birth brought with it a realization that would change everything that followed. The tremendous effort of bringing new cosmic life into existence had consumed more of Cos's vital essence than anyone had anticipated. The Great One, who had protected the fishing hamlet for generations, who had served as mother and guardian to an entire community, was dying. Her sacrifice to ensure her child's safe arrival in existence was total and irreversible. The villagers felt Cos's weakening condition through their dream connection with an intensity that was almost unbearable. They understood that their cosmic protector was giving her very life to ensure the Orphan's successful birth, and they grieved even as they celebrated the arrival of the new Great One. Their love for Cos, built up over generations of benevolent protection and guidance, made her approaching death a community tragedy of unimaginable proportions. The Orphan, newly conscious and still learning to control its cosmic abilities, sensed its mother's condition with the clarity that only direct cosmic perception could provide. The young Great One understood that it was about to lose the being who had brought it into existence, and its response to this impending loss began to manifest in ways that would have profound consequences for everyone present at the birth. The scholars, focused on their instruments and documentation, were the last to realize the true implications of what they were witnessing. They understood that cosmic energies were shifting, and that the phenomenon they had been studying was entering a new phase, but they failed to appreciate that they were about to become witnesses to cosmic grief on a scale that no mortal mind was equipped to comprehend. Chapter 6: The Scholar's Fatal Mistake. As Cos's life force ebbed away in the aftermath of the Orphan's birth, the scholarly expedition from Byrgenwerth found themselves confronting a situation that their academic training had never prepared them to handle. They had come to study cosmic phenomena with the detached objectivity of scientific inquiry, but now they were witnesses to what could only be described as a cosmic family tragedy of unprecedented proportions. The Great One, who had served as their primary research subject, was dying, and her child was experiencing grief and confusion that transcended ordinary emotional categories. The lead researcher, Dr. Adeline, that's Adeline, not Adeline, like the song, recognized that they were observing something that went far beyond their original research parameters. The cosmic energies surrounding Kos's dying form were creating disturbances in local reality that threatened to overwhelm their equipment and potentially endanger the expedition members. More troubling still, the newborn orphan's emotional responses to its mother's condition were beginning to manifest in ways that suggested immense and uncontrolled cosmic power. The scholarly team faced a decision that would determine not only the success of their expedition, but the fate of everyone involved in the cosmic birth they had witnessed. They could withdraw to a safe distance and limit themselves to remote observation, potentially missing crucial data but ensuring their own survival. Alternatively, they could move closer and attempt to conduct direct studies of the dying Great One and her offspring, risking exposure to cosmic forces that could fundamentally alter their own existence. The decision was influenced by factors that extended far beyond pure scientific consideration. Master Willem, communicating with the expedition through their advanced communication equipment, was adamant that this opportunity could not be wasted. The chance to study a Great One's death and obtain samples of cosmic tissue and bodily fluids was unprecedented and might never occur again. The knowledge that could be gained from such studies could advance human understanding by millennia and provide the foundation for achieving the evolutionary transcendence that Willem believed was humanity's destiny. But there were also more immediate practical considerations that influenced the scholar's choice. Their instruments had detected traces of what appeared to be cosmic blood in the water around Kos's dying form, substances that exhibited properties unlike anything in their experience. If they could obtain samples of these materials and transport them back to Byrgenwerth for detailed analysis, they would possess physical evidence of Great One physiology that could revolutionize their understanding of cosmic biology. The decision to proceed with direct sampling was made over the objections of several expedition members, who argued that they were intruding upon a sacred and deeply personal moment. These dissenting voices pointed out that the villagers of the fishing hamlet clearly had an established relationship with Kos that should be respected, and that taking samples from a dying Great One without permission seemed ethically questionable at best. However, the expedition's leadership, influenced by Willem's directives and driven by the unprecedented nature of the opportunity, chose to prioritize scientific advancement over ethical concerns. They rationalized their decision by arguing that the knowledge they could gain would ultimately benefit all humanity, and that the Great Ones, as cosmic beings, likely operated according to moral frameworks that were entirely different from human ethical systems. The sampling operation began at what appeared to be Kos's moment of death. The Great One's massive form, which had been moving in patterns that suggested conscious effort throughout the birth process, finally became still. The cosmic energies that had been radiating from her began to dissipate, but her physical body remained, floating in waters that had been transformed by her presence into something that was part ocean, part cosmic substance. The scholars approached the deceased Great One with equipment designed to extract samples of tissue, blood, and other bodily substances for later analysis. Their instruments, pushed beyond their normal operational parameters by exposure to cosmic materials, functioned erratically but continued to provide useful data. The samples they obtained defied conventional analysis. They appeared to be simultaneously liquid and solid, organic and inorganic, matter and energy, existing in states that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality. But as the scholars continued their sampling operation, they became aware that they were no longer alone in the cosmic space where Kos had died. The orphan, initially overwhelmed by grief at its mother's passing, was beginning to focus its attention on the beings who were disturbing its mother's remains. The young Great One's perception of the scholars was filtered through cosmic awareness that operated according to principles entirely different from human understanding, but its emotional response was unmistakably hostile. The villagers of the fishing hamlet, connected to the cosmic events through their enhanced dream awareness, experienced the scholars' intrusion as a profound violation of something sacred. They felt the orphan's growing rage and understood that the researchers' actions were transforming grief into fury, creating a situation that could have catastrophic consequences for everyone involved. Attempts to communicate their concerns to the scholarly expedition were hampered by the researchers' focus on their work and their fundamental misunderstanding of the relationships involved. The first sign of the Orphan's hostile response came through disturbances in the cosmic energies surrounding the research area. Equipment began to malfunction, not through mechanical failure, but through exposure to forces that operated according to principles that defied conventional physics. Water samples taken from around Koz's body exhibited properties that suggested they were not entirely within normal three-dimensional space, existing partially in dimensions that human instruments could detect, but not properly measure. Dr. Adeline, monitoring the expedition's progress from the primary research vessel, began to sense that they had crossed a line that should not have been crossed. The cosmic disturbances were intensifying rather than subsiding, and the emotional resonance that she was picking up through her sensitivity to cosmic influences suggested that they had transformed what should have been a moment of cosmic mourning into something approaching cosmic rage. The Orphan's anger was not random or chaotic, but focused with the precision that only cosmic intelligence could achieve. The young Great One understood exactly who had violated the sanctity of its mother's death, and began to respond in ways that would ensure that such violations could never occur again. Its first actions were directed toward the scholarly expedition itself, but the cosmic forces it was unleashing would have implications that extended far beyond the immediate participants in the tragedy. The transformation of the Orphan from grieving child to avenging force occurred with frightening rapidity. Cosmic beings, the scholars realized too late, did not process emotions according to human timeframes or limitations. The young Great One's grief and rage were operating at cosmic scale and intensity, creating disturbances in reality that began to affect not just the immediate area around Koz's remains, but the entire region where the birth and death had occurred. The expedition members who had been conducting the direct sampling operation found themselves caught in the initial manifestations of the Orphan's fury. Cosmic energies that had been merely overwhelming suddenly became actively hostile, targeting the researchers with precision that suggested intelligent direction rather than random natural forces. Equipment began to fail in ways that seemed designed to maximize the expedition's vulnerability while minimizing their ability to escape or defend themselves. As reports of escalating danger reached the primary research vessel, Dr. Adeline faced the terrible realization that her expedition had inadvertently triggered a cosmic catastrophe. The young Great One they had observed, being born, was now directing its immense power toward ensuring that no one who had violated its mother's remains would escape consequences. The scholarly pursuit of knowledge had been transformed into a situation that threatened not just the expedition members, but potentially anyone associated with their activities. The villagers of the fishing hamlet, watching these events unfold through their cosmic connection, understood that they were witnessing the birth of something that would fundamentally alter their world. The Orphan's rage was not limited to the scholars who had directly violated Koz's remains. It was expanding to encompass everyone who had been present during the cosmic birth, everyone who had failed to prevent the desecration, everyone who had allowed such violations to occur within the sacred space where a Great One had died. Chapter 7. The curse takes root. The Orphan's rage, once unleashed, did not dissipate with the immediate punishment of those who had directly violated its mother's remains. Instead, it grew and evolved, taking on characteristics that reflected not just the young Great One's grief and fury, but its cosmic nature and the vast scope of power at its disposal. What began as a directed response to specific violations gradually expanded into something approaching a fundamental alteration in the nature of reality itself, a curse that would reach across time and space to ensure that justice would be served in ways that transcended conventional understanding of cause and effect. The first manifestations of the curse were felt by the scholarly expedition members who had been directly involved in the sampling operation. They found themselves experiencing phenomena that operated outside normal physical laws. Equipment that had been functioning normally began to exhibit behaviors that suggested hostile intelligence rather than mechanical failure. Navigation instruments provided readings that led them in circles. Communication equipment transmitted messages that no one had sent, and their research data began to change, and corrupt itself in ways that seemed designed to frustrate their scientific objectives. But these initial effects were merely the surface manifestations of something far more profound and far-reaching. The Orphan's cosmic perspective allowed it to perceive connections and relationships that were invisible to mortal understanding. It could see the network of cause and effect that had led to its mother's death, the chain of decisions and actions that had brought the scholars to the cosmic birth site, and the institutional structures that had made such violations possible. The curse, as it took shape under the Orphan's direction, was designed to address not just the immediate violation, but the entire system of thinking and behavior that had made such violations inevitable. It would target not only those who had directly participated in the desecration of Cause's remains, but everyone who shared in the worldview and methodology that treated cosmic beings as subjects for study rather than entities deserving of respect and consideration. The villagers of the fishing hamlet, through their enhanced cosmic connection, began to sense the true scope of what was being unleashed. The curse was not limited to the scholarly expedition or even to the academic institutions they represented. It was expanding to encompass anyone who approached cosmic mysteries with the kind of detached analytical mindset that could reduce sacred moments to research opportunities. This meant that eventually the curse would reach the hunters of Yharnam, whose relationship with cosmic forces was characterized by exactly the kind of exploitative attitude that the Orphan was determined to punish. The immediate effects on the scholars were both physical and psychological. Those who had been present during the sampling operation began to experience visions and dreams that were filled with images of cosmic justice and revenge. They saw themselves from the Orphan's perspective, understanding for the first time how their actions had appeared to a cosmic consciousness that viewed the desecration of its mother's remains as the ultimate violation of sacred trust. Dr. Adeling, coordinating the expedition's response to the crisis from the primary research vessel, found herself experiencing the curse's effects through her role as expedition leader. Her instruments began providing data that seemed designed to lead the expedition into greater danger rather than away from it. More disturbingly, she began to experience moments of expanded awareness where she could perceive the cosmic forces that were being directed against them, understanding with terrifying clarity the vast scope of the power that they had inadvertently provoked. The scholarly team's attempts to escape the curse's immediate effects were hampered by the fact that cosmic justice operated according to principles that were entirely different from physical cause and effect. Distance provided no protection against forces that existed partially outside normal space-time, and conventional defensive measures were useless against attacks that targeted consciousness and identity rather than physical form. The transformation of the research area itself became increasingly apparent as the curse took hold. Waters that had been merely unusual in their properties began to exhibit characteristics that suggested they were no longer entirely within normal reality. Marine life in the area underwent rapid changes that created species that existed partially in the cosmic realm, serving as agents and manifestations of the Orphan's will. The village elder of the fishing hamlet, through his intensified dream connection with cosmic forces, began to receive visions that revealed the ultimate scope of the curse that was being created. He saw that the Orphan's rage was not limited to immediate revenge, but was being shaped into something that would persist across generations, ensuring that the violation of its mother's death would never be forgotten, and that similar violations would be prevented through the application of cosmic justice. These visions revealed that the curse would eventually manifest as a realm of eternal punishment, where those who had committed violations against cosmic beings would be trapped in cycles of retribution that matched the severity of their crimes. This realm, which would later become known as the Hunter's Nightmare, would serve as both prison and courtroom, where cosmic justice would be administered according to principles that transcended mortal understanding of fairness and proportion. The scholars' final attempts to complete their research and escape with their samples were thwarted by the increasingly hostile environment that the curse was creating around them. Equipment that had been functioning normally began to work against them, providing false readings and directing them toward greater danger. More fundamentally, the cosmic samples they had obtained began to exhibit properties that made them dangerous to possess, radiating energies that corrupted and transformed anyone who came into prolonged contact with them. The villagers, witnessing the expansion of the curse through their cosmic awareness, understood that they were about to lose not only their great protector Kos, but their entire way of life. The curse that the Orphan was creating would eventually encompass their village and everyone in it, not because they had participated in the violations, but because they had failed to prevent them. In the cosmic perspective that governed the Orphan's actions, the distinction between active participation and passive acceptance of violations was less significant than mortal ethics might suggest. The final phase of the curse's initial manifestation involved the transformation of the physical space where Kos had died into something that existed partially outside normal reality. This transformation created a kind of cosmic wound in the fabric of space-time, a permanent scar that would serve as an anchor point for the more extensive curse that the Orphan was planning to create. The scholarly expedition's fate was sealed, not by any single dramatic event, but by the gradual accumulation of cosmic justice that made their escape increasingly impossible. They found themselves trapped in an environment where the normal rules of physics and causality had been suspended, where their own actions and equipment worked against them, and where the very space they occupied was being transformed into something that existed according to principles they had never imagined. Dr. Adelaine's final communications with Byrgenwerth College described phenomena that her colleagues initially dismissed as stress-induced hallucinations, but which were actually accurate descriptions of cosmic forces that operated according to principles beyond conventional scientific understanding. Her reports of equipment that exhibited apparent intelligence, of navigational instruments that led them in directions that did not correspond to any terrestrial geography, and of research samples that seemed to be actively trying to escape containment, were all manifestations of the curse that the Orphan was weaving around them. The transformation of the expedition members themselves began during this final phase, as prolonged exposure to the curse's effects started to alter their fundamental nature. They began to exist partially outside normal space-time, becoming subject to forms of existence and experience that no human consciousness was designed to handle. Their scientific training, rather than protecting them, made them more vulnerable to these transformations by predisposing them to analyze and categorize experiences that could only be properly understood through acceptance and submission. Chapter 8. The Massacre unfolds. What followed the initial manifestation of the Orphan's curse was not a single dramatic confrontation, but a gradual escalation of cosmic justice that would eventually consume everyone who had been present during Kos's violation. The scholarly expedition, trapped in an environment where reality itself had been altered by the young Great One's rage, found themselves facing not just immediate danger, but a systematic unraveling of everything they had thought they understood about the nature of existence. Dr. Adeline, monitoring the situation from the primary research vessel, watched in horror as her colleagues' final communications became increasingly incoherent. They described experiences that seemed to exist outside normal categories of perception, being simultaneously in multiple locations, experiencing time as a spatial dimension, and encountering aspects of their own consciousness that had been separated from their individual identity and were operating independently. The curse's effects were not random, but precisely calibrated to address what the Orphan perceived as the fundamental violations that had occurred. Those who had treated cosmic beings as research subjects found themselves becoming subjects of cosmic research, experiencing analysis and experimentation from entities whose methods and purposes were as incomprehensible to them as theirs had been to Kos. The transformation was not merely punitive, but educational, designed to provide the violators with direct experiential knowledge of what they had inflicted upon others. But the curse's reach extended beyond the immediate expedition members to encompass the entire network of relationships and institutions that had made the violation possible. The communications equipment that connected the expedition to Byrgenwerth College became a conduit through which cosmic influence could reach the academic institution that had initiated and supported the research. Master Willem and his colleagues began to experience phenomena that suggested their laboratory and research facilities were being subjected to the same kind of analytical scrutiny that they had directed toward cosmic beings. The villagers of the fishing hamlet, connected to these events through their cosmic awareness, understood that they were witnessing the implementation of justice on a scale that transcended individual punishment. The curse was designed to address not just specific violations, but the entire worldview and methodology that made such violations possible. This meant that eventually it would encompass anyone who approached cosmic mysteries with the kind of exploitative attitude that characterized both academic research and the hunting practices that had developed in Yharnam. The physical transformation of the research area accelerated as the curse gained strength and focus. The waters around Kos's remains began to exhibit properties that existed outside normal physics. They became simultaneously liquid and solid, reflecting light that came from sources that were not visible in normal space, and supporting marine life that existed partially in cosmic dimensions. These transformed waters became a kind of cosmic acid that dissolved not just physical matter, but the conceptual boundaries that separated different forms of existence. The expedition's research vessels, constructed using the most advanced maritime technology available, proved useless against forces that operated according to cosmic, rather than physical principles. Their hulls began to dissolve, not through any chemical process, but through exposure to cosmic forces that treated physical matter as merely one option among many possible forms of existence. Navigation systems provided readings that led them not to geographical destinations, but to locations that existed in cosmic space, places that could be reached, but never escaped. The scholarly team's final attempts at documentation and analysis became increasingly futile as their instruments began to record phenomena that existed outside the categories their equipment was designed to measure. Cameras captured images of spaces that had too many dimensions. Recording devices picked up sounds that existed in frequencies that bypassed human hearing and directly affected consciousness. And measurement devices provided readings that suggested they were simultaneously in multiple locations that contradicted each other. Dr. Adeline's last coherent communication with Byrgenwerth described a situation that her colleagues initially interpreted as equipment failure, but which was actually an accurate report of cosmic transformation. She reported that the expedition's position could not be determined because they were existing in spaces that had no fixed relationship to terrestrial geography, that their instruments were providing data about cosmic rather than physical phenomena, and that the expedition members themselves were undergoing changes that made normal human categorization increasingly inappropriate. The transformation of the expedition members during this phase involved not just physical alteration, but fundamental changes in their consciousness and identity. They began to experience existence from cosmic perspectives that human minds were not designed to accommodate, perceiving reality as a fluid and mutable construct, rather than a fixed and objective environment. Their scientific training, which had predisposed them to seek objective truth through analytical methods, made these transformations particularly traumatic by creating conflicts between their ingrained intellectual approaches and the subjective, experiential nature of cosmic consciousness. The curse's effects on the fishing hamlet itself began to manifest as the cosmic forces that the Orphan was directing reached beyond their immediate targets to encompass the entire environment where the violations had occurred. The village, which had existed in harmonious relationship with cosmic forces for generations, began to experience the same kind of dissolution and transformation that was affecting the scholarly expedition. But the village's experience of cosmic transformation was different from that of the scholars, because their relationship with cosmic forces had been based on respect and symbiosis, rather than exploitation and analysis. Where the expedition members experienced cosmic consciousness as alien and threatening, the villagers found aspects of cosmic existence that were familiar and comprehensible through their long association with Ko. However, this did not protect them from the curse's effects, but merely altered the form that cosmic justice took in their case. The village elder, through his enhanced cosmic awareness, began to understand that the curse was not designed to distinguish between those who had actively participated in violations and those who had simply been present when they occurred. From the Orphan's cosmic perspective, The failure to prevent violations was itself a form of complicity that required address through cosmic justice. The entire community that had witnessed Kos's desecration without taking action to prevent it would be subject to transformation and punishment. The physical changes in the fishing hamlet paralleled those occurring in the research area, but took forms that reflected the village's different relationship with cosmic forces. Buildings began to exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions, creating architectural spaces that were larger inside than outside, and that connected to locations that existed in cosmic rather than geographical space. The harbor that had served the village for generations began to accommodate vessels that arrived from cosmic rather than terrestrial waters, carrying passengers and cargo that existed according to principles that defied conventional understanding. The villagers themselves began to undergo transformations that reflected their role as witnesses to cosmic violation rather than active participants. They retained more of their individual identity and consciousness than the expedition members, but found themselves existing partially outside normal time and space, experiencing past and future events as immediate present reality and perceiving locations and beings that existed in cosmic dimensions. Chapter 9. The Hunter's Nightmare Born. As the curse reached its full manifestation, the cosmic forces that the Orphan had unleashed began to coalesce into something that transcended immediate punishment and approached the creation of an entirely new realm of existence. This realm, which would eventually become known as the Hunter's Nightmare, was designed to serve as both prison and court of cosmic justice, where violations against Great Ones would be addressed through eternal cycles of retribution that matched the severity of the crimes committed. The transformation of space and time around the fishing hamlet and the research area created what could best be described as a cosmic wound, a place where normal reality had been so severely damaged that it could no longer maintain its usual boundaries and limitations. Within this wounded space, the laws of physics became suggestions rather than absolutes. Causality operated according to cosmic rather than temporal logic, and individual identity became subject to forces that could reshape consciousness as easily as matter. The Orphan, now fully focused on creating a realm of cosmic justice, began to structure this wounded space according to principles that reflected both its desire for revenge and its inherited understanding of mortal psychology. The realm that took shape under its direction was designed to provide punishment that was precisely calibrated to the specific violations that each individual had committed, ensuring that cosmic justice would be both comprehensive and personally meaningful to those who experienced it. The first inhabitants of this emerging nightmare realm were the expedition members, who had been most directly involved in the violation of Kos's remains. They found themselves trapped in environments that forced them to experience what they had inflicted upon others, becoming subjects of analysis and experimentation conducted by cosmic entities whose methods and purposes were as incomprehensible to them as theirs had been to the Great Ones. They had studied Dr. Adeline, whose leadership role made her particularly responsible for the expedition's violations, experienced punishment that took the form of endless research under conditions where she could never obtain the knowledge she sought. Her cosmic laboratory provided her with instruments that gave false readings, specimens that changed their nature when observed, and research objectives that shifted and evolved beyond her ability to comprehend. The scientific method that had been her professional foundation became a source of endless frustration and confusion. But the Hunter's Nightmare was designed to encompass more than just the immediate violators of Kos's remains. The Orphan's cosmic perception had revealed the entire network of relationships and attitudes that had made such violations possible, and the Nightmare Realm expanded to include anyone whose approach to cosmic mysteries reflected the same letative mindset that had led to its mother's desecration. This meant that the curse would eventually reach the hunters of Yharnam, whose relationship with cosmic forces was characterized by exactly the kind of detached, analytical approach that the Orphan was determined to punish. The hunters' practice of studying Great Ones for the purpose of gaining power over them, their willingness to violate cosmic beings for the sake of human advancement, and their treatment of cosmic mysteries as puzzles to be solved rather than relationships to be respected, all marked them as appropriate subjects for cosmic justice. The villagers of the fishing hamlet experienced the nightmare's effects differently because their relationship with cosmic forces had been based on respect and symbiosis, rather than exploitation. However, their failure to prevent the violations that had occurred in their sacred space meant that they too would be subject to cosmic justice, though in forms that reflected their different level of culpability. The village elder found himself serving as a kind of cosmic interpreter within the nightmare realm, helping other inhabitants understand the nature of the justice being administered and the principles that governed their punishment. His role required him to maintain his individual consciousness and awareness while existing within a realm where identity and perception were constantly subject to cosmic manipulation and transformation. The physical structure of the hunter's nightmare reflected the orphan's understanding of both mortal psychology and cosmic justice. The realm was designed as a twisted mirror of the world that the violators had known, familiar enough to be psychologically meaningful, but distorted in ways that ensured constant discomfort and disorientation. Locations existed in spatial relationships that defied normal geography. Time flowed according to patterns that prevented escape through simple endurance, and the inhabitants found themselves encountering distorted versions of people and places from their past. The nightmare's version of the fishing hamlet served as the central courthouse where cosmic justice was administered. The village appeared much as it had during the time of Kos's protection, but every detail was subtly wrong, in ways that created constant psychological pressure. Houses stood at angles that hurt the eyes to observe. The harbor contained waters that reflected scenes from other times and places, and the villagers moved in patterns that suggested they were following scripts written by cosmic intelligence. The research area where Kos had been violated became a kind of cosmic crime scene that existed in a state of permanent investigation. The expedition's equipment remained functional, but provided only evidence of their guilt, playing back recordings of their violations in endless loops, and displaying data that documented their crimes with cosmic precision. The scholars found themselves compelled to review their actions repeatedly, understanding with increasing clarity the magnitude of what they had done. The Orphan itself served as both judge and jury within the nightmare realm, but its presence was rarely direct or obvious. Instead, the young Great One's will was manifest through the structure and logic of the nightmare itself, creating an environment where cosmic justice was implemented through the realm's fundamental nature rather than through explicit punishment or intervention. The nightmare's temporal structure was particularly insidious, designed to prevent inhabitants from finding relief through adaptation or habituation. Time moved in cycles that brought regular reminders of their violations, while never providing enough continuity to allow for genuine psychological adjustment. Past and future events existed as immediate present reality, ensuring that the guilt and consequences of their actions remained constantly fresh and psychologically immediate. The communication systems within the nightmare realm allowed inhabitants to remain aware of events occurring in the normal world, but only in ways that increased their sense of guilt and responsibility. They could observe the ongoing consequences of their actions, but were powerless to intervene or make amends, creating a form of psychological torture that was precisely calibrated to their specific violations and character weaknesses. The cosmic forces that maintained the hunter's nightmare drew their power from the ongoing emotional resonance of the violations that had created it. The inhabitants' guilt, fear, and desperate desire for escape served as fuel for the nightmare's continued existence, ensuring that the realm would persist as long as the cosmic injustices that created it remained unaddressed. The nightmare's expansion beyond its original inhabitants was built into its fundamental structure. The Orphan had designed the realm to recognize and draw in anyone whose actions or attitudes reflected the same violations that had led to its mother's desecration. This meant that the nightmare would grow over time, encompassing an ever-expanding circle of individuals whose relationship with cosmic forces was characterized by exploitation rather than respect. Chapter 10. Simon's Witness. Among the hunters who would eventually be drawn into the nightmare realm was one whose story would become central to understanding the true nature of the cosmic justice being administered there. Simon the Harrowed, his surname coming from the archaic term meaning distressed or tormented, had been present during some of the early church expeditions that built upon the initial discoveries made by the Byrgenwerth scholars at the fishing hamlet. Simon's involvement in the cosmic violations that led to the curse began not through direct participation, but through his role as a hunter assigned to protect subsequent research expeditions. The church, building upon the initial reports from Dr. Adeline's doomed expedition, had organized follow-up missions to the area around the fishing hamlet, seeking to understand what had happened to the original researchers and to recover any samples or data that might have survived the catastrophe. As a young and idealistic hunter, Simon had initially approached these assignments with the same dedication to protecting human interests that characterized the best of the church's hunting corps. He understood his role as providing security for researchers who were advancing human knowledge and potentially discovering sources of power that could be used to combat the beast scourge that threatened Yohanan. The cosmic implications of their work and the ethical questions surrounding their treatment of great ones were not immediately apparent to him. Simon's first expedition to the transformed research area was a profound shock that would fundamentally alter his understanding of both cosmic forces and the nature of the work he was supporting. The team he was assigned to protect included scholars who had studied Dr. Adeline's final reports and believed they could succeed where the original expedition had failed, by approaching the cosmic phenomena with better equipment and more careful methodology. What Simon and his team discovered at the research site was an environment that no longer corresponded to normal geographic reality. The waters where Coes had died exhibited properties that challenged basic assumptions about the nature of matter and space, while the remnants of the original expedition's equipment had been transformed into artifacts that existed partially outside normal dimensions. Most disturbing of all were the traces they found of the original expedition members, not bodies or conventional remains, but something that could only be described as consciousness fragments that had been separated from individual identity and were existing independently within the cosmic environment. The scholars on Simon's expedition approached these phenomena with the same analytical detachment that had characterized their predecessors, treating the evidence of cosmic transformation as research opportunities rather than warnings. They collected samples of the transformed water, attempted to analyze the equipment artifacts, and even tried to establish communication with the consciousness fragments they discovered. Simon's role was to ensure their safety while they conducted these investigations. But as the expedition's work progressed, Simon began to understand that they were not simply studying cosmic phenomena, but were repeating and extending the same violations that had doomed the original researchers. The scholars' approach to the consciousness fragments of Dr. Adeline's team was particularly disturbing. They treated these remnants of human identity as experimental subjects, rather than as the remains of colleagues who deserved respect and proper burial. Simon's growing awareness of the ethical implications of his mission created an internal conflict that would ultimately determine his fate within the curse's expanding reach. As a hunter, he was trained to prioritize human welfare and to support activities that advanced human power and security. But as a witness to the cosmic violations being committed in the name of scientific progress, he began to understand that some forms of knowledge came at prices that were too high to justify paying. The expedition's final days were characterized by the same escalating cosmic interference that had doomed their predecessors. Equipment began to malfunction in ways that suggested hostile intelligence. Environmental conditions became increasingly dangerous and unpredictable, and the scholars themselves began to experience phenomena that indicated they were being subjected to cosmic analysis and experimentation. Simon's protective duties became increasingly difficult as the very environment they were working in began to actively resist their presence. The transformation of the research site accelerated during Simon's expedition, with the cosmic wound that had been created by the original violations beginning to expand and affect larger areas. The nightmare realm that the Orphan was creating began to manifest more directly, creating pockets of altered reality where normal physical laws were suspended and cosmic justice operated according to principles that defied conventional understanding. Simon's final reports to the church described phenomena that his superiors initially dismissed as stress-induced hallucinations, but which were actually accurate accounts of cosmic transformation. He reported that the expedition members were beginning to exist simultaneously in multiple versions of reality, that their research equipment was providing data from dimensions that did not correspond to normal space, and that the consciousness fragments they had been studying were attempting to communicate warnings about the nature of cosmic justice. The expedition's fate was sealed by their continuation of the same violations that had doomed their predecessors. Despite Simon's increasingly urgent warnings about the dangers they were facing, the scholars remained focused on their research objectives, treating the escalating cosmic phenomena as obstacles to be overcome, rather than consequences to be acknowledged and addressed. Simon's transformation into an inhabitant of the Hunter's Nightmare occurred gradually, as his awareness of the cosmic violations he had failed to prevent created the guilt and complicity that the nightmare realm was designed to punish. He found himself existing partially within the nightmare, even while still maintaining some connection to normal reality, experiencing the cosmic justice being administered there, while retaining enough individual consciousness to serve as a witness and interpreter of what was occurring. His role within the nightmare became that of a guide and advisor to other inhabitants, particularly those hunters who would be drawn into the realm by their own participation in cosmic violations. Simon's understanding of both the hunting profession and the nature of cosmic justice made him uniquely qualified to help others comprehend the principles governing their punishment and the possibilities for redemption that might exist within the nightmare's structure. The harrowed appearance that gave Simon his surname reflected the psychological toll of existing simultaneously within normal reality and cosmic nightmare. He experienced constant awareness of the violations he had failed to prevent, the colleagues he had been unable to save, and the ongoing consequences of cosmic injustices that continued to expand throughout Johannem and beyond. Simon's weapon of choice, the bowblade, became a symbol of his role as a witness and guide within the nightmare realm. The bow's ability to strike targets at a distance reflected his function as an observer who could perceive cosmic justice being administered throughout the nightmare, while maintaining enough detachment to provide guidance to others. The blade transformation represented his continued readiness to take action when such action might serve the cause of genuine justice, rather than mere human advancement. His presence within the nightmare served multiple purposes within the cosmic justice being administered there. For the Orphan, Simon represented a form of consciousness that could understand both human and cosmic perspectives, making him valuable as an interpreter and communicator. For other inhabitants of the nightmare, he provided a source of guidance and explanation that made their punishment more meaningful and potentially redemptive. Chapter 11. The Church's Corruption. The curse that emanated from the fishing Hamlet did not remain contained within the nightmare realm, but spread throughout the networks of institutional relationships that had made the original violations possible. The Healing Church, which had sponsored and supported the research expeditions that led to Kos's desecration, found itself increasingly subject to cosmic influences that operated according to the same principles of justice that governed the Hunter's Nightmare. The Church's corruption was not immediate or dramatic, but manifested through a gradual intensification of characteristics and tendencies that had always been present within the institution. The hierarchical structure that had allowed the Church to pursue its research objectives without adequate ethical oversight became increasingly rigid and authoritarian. The faith-based justifications that had been used to rationalize questionable research practices became more extreme and divorced from genuine spiritual values. Master Lawrence, the Church's founder and primary leader, found himself experiencing phenomena that paralleled what had happened to the Byrgenwerth scholars who had first violated Kos's remains. His communications with church hierarchy began to exhibit the same kind of temporal and spatial distortions that had characterized Dr. Adeline's final reports. Research data collected by church expeditions started to change and corrupt itself in ways that suggested hostile cosmic intelligence rather than simple equipment failure. The Church's response to these phenomena reflected the same analytical mindset that had led to the original violations, Rather than recognizing the cosmic justice being administered against them, church leaders interpreted the escalating problems as challenges to be overcome through better methodology and more sophisticated equipment. They increased their research activities and expanded their expeditions, believing that more thorough investigation would eventually provide solutions to the problems they were experiencing. But the curse's effects were designed to ensure that this approach would only accelerate the church's corruption and eventual downfall. Each new research expedition created additional violations that strengthened the cosmic forces working against them. Each attempt to analyze and control cosmic phenomena provided more opportunities for the curse to reach deeper into the church's institutional structure and individual leadership. The blood ministration that formed the foundation of the church's medical practice became a primary vector through which cosmic corruption spread throughout Yharnam. The old blood that had been discovered in the Pthumerian labyrinths carried traces of cosmic influence that were amplified and directed by the curse emanating from the fishing hamlet. Recipients of blood treatment found themselves subject to transformations that reflected the same principles of cosmic justice that governed the hunter's nightmare. The church's hunting corps, which had been established to combat the beast scourge that resulted from blood ministration, became increasingly involved in activities that replicated the violations that had triggered the original curse. Hunters were assigned to capture and study cosmic beings, to gather samples from great ones encountered during their missions, and to develop weapons and techniques that drew power from cosmic sources without regard for the consent or welfare of the beings being exploited. Ludwig the Accursed, that's Ludwig, not Ludwig like Beethoven, became a central figure in the church's expanding involvement with cosmic violations. His discovery of the Holy Moonlight Sword, a weapon of obvious cosmic origin, marked a turning point in the relationship between the church's hunters and the Great Ones they were increasingly called upon to combat. Ludwig's success with this cosmic weapon encouraged other hunters to seek similar sources of power, leading to expeditions and research projects that systematically violated cosmic beings. The church's institutional structure provided an ideal framework for the curse's expansion throughout Yharnam's population. The hierarchy that distributed blood ministration also distributed cosmic corruption, while the authority structure that governed church decisions ensured that policies reflecting cosmic violations would be implemented throughout the institution's sphere of influence. The faith-based justifications that legitimized church activities made it difficult for individual members to question or resist directives that contributed to the curse's strengthening. The transformation of Yharnam itself under the curse's influence paralleled what had occurred at the fishing hamlet, but took forms that reflected the urban environment and the church's institutional presence. Buildings began to exhibit architectural features that existed partially outside normal space, creating urban spaces that were larger inside than outside, and that connected to locations that existed in cosmic rather than geographic dimensions. The beast scourge that had always been a problem in Yharnam began to intensify and take new forms under the curse's influence. The transformations experienced by blood ministration recipients became more extreme and unpredictable, while the cosmic influences that drove these changes became more directly hostile to human consciousness and identity. The beasts that resulted from these transformations exhibited behaviors that suggested they were serving cosmic purposes rather than simply following animal instincts. The church's research facilities became focal points for cosmic corruption, with laboratories and study areas serving as conduits through which the curse could reach deeper into the institution's activities. Equipment that had been designed to study cosmic phenomena began to exhibit the same hostile intelligence that had affected the Byrgenwerth expeditions, providing false data and directing researchers toward greater violations rather than genuine understanding. The communication systems that connected different church facilities and coordinated institutional activities became subject to the same temporal and spatial distortions that characterized the hunter's nightmare. Messages arrived before they were sent. Communications contained information that no one had transmitted, and coordination meetings occurred in spaces that existed simultaneously in multiple locations and time periods. Individual church members experienced the curse's effects according to their level of involvement in cosmic violations and their position within the institutional hierarchy. Leaders who had authorized research expeditions found themselves subject to transformations that paralleled what had happened to the Byrgenwerth scholars, while lower-level participants experienced phenomena that reflected their specific contributions to the Church's violating activities. The Church's theological framework, which had always emphasized human advancement and the pursuit of transcendence, became increasingly distorted under the curse's influence. Religious doctrines that had once provided genuine spiritual guidance were twisted into justifications for cosmic violations, while faith-based practices became corrupted into rituals that served cosmic forces rather than human spiritual development. The expansion of the curse throughout the Church's institutional structure created feedback loops that accelerated the corruption process. Each new violation strengthened the cosmic forces working against the institution, which in turn created conditions that made additional violations more likely and more severe. The Church found itself trapped in a spiral of escalating corruption that reflected the same principles of cosmic justice that governed the Hunter's nightmare. Chapter 12. The Blood-Drunk Hunters. As the curse emanating from the fishing hamlet spread throughout Yharnam's institutional structures, it began to affect the hunters who formed the backbone of the Church's response to the beast scourge. These warriors, trained to combat the monstrous transformations that resulted from blood ministration, found themselves increasingly subject to the same cosmic forces that had created the nightmare realm where cosmic justice was administered. The hunters' corruption was not immediately apparent, because it manifested through intensification of characteristics that were already central to their profession. The aggression and violence that were necessary for combat against beasts became more extreme and less discriminating. The willingness to use any weapon or technique that provided tactical advantage became an obsession with power that disregarded ethical considerations. The dedication to protecting human interests became a fanatical nationalism that justified any action taken against perceived threats. The blood echoes that hunters absorbed from defeated enemies served as a primary vector through which the curse reached the hunting core. These spiritual remnants of vanquished foes carried traces of cosmic influence that accumulated within hunters' consciousness over time, creating changes that paralleled the transformations experienced by blood ministration recipients. But where ordinary citizens experienced physical beast transformation, hunters experienced something more insidious, a gradual corruption of judgment and moral sensibility that made them increasingly willing to commit cosmic violations. The most experienced hunters, those who had absorbed the greatest quantities of blood, echoes through years of successful combat, were most vulnerable to what came to be known as blood-drunk syndrome. This condition involved not just physical addiction to the euphoric effects of blood echo absorption, but psychological dependence on the violence and dominance that characterized successful hunting. Blood-drunk hunters became incapable of functioning without regular combat, seeking out conflicts and enemies even when such activities served no protective purpose. Ludwig's transformation into the accursed beast represented the ultimate expression of how the curse affected hunters who had achieved great success through cosmic violations. His partnership with the Holy Moonlight Sword had provided him with power that made him one of the most effective hunters in Yharnam's history, but the cosmic forces behind that weapon had been gradually corrupting his consciousness and identity throughout his career. The sword itself was revealed to be a conduit through which cosmic entities could influence and eventually control the hunters who wielded it. Ludwig's belief that he was serving noble purposes by protecting Yharnam was gradually replaced by cosmic imperatives that prioritized the advancement of alien agendas over human welfare. His transformation from idealistic protector to cosmic puppet illustrated the insidious nature of corruption that operated through apparently beneficial relationships with great ones. The Church's hunter training programs became mechanisms for spreading cosmic corruption throughout the hunting corps. New hunters learned techniques and approaches that had been developed through study of cosmic beings and weapons, inheriting not just practical skills, but the philosophical frameworks that justified cosmic violations. The mentor-student relationships that transmitted hunting knowledge also transmitted the corrupt attitudes and practices that made hunters vulnerable to curse effects. The hunting tools and weapons that the Church provided to its warriors were increasingly derived from cosmic sources, or enhanced through cosmic research. Trick weapons that transformed between different configurations drew their functionality from principles that violated conventional physics, while hunter attire included materials and designs that provided protection through cosmic rather than purely physical means. These equipment enhancements created ongoing connections between hunters and cosmic forces that served as vectors for corruption and control. The Chapel of Anticipation, where hunters gathered for guidance and coordination, became a focal point for the curse's influence within the hunting community. The spiritual exercises and preparation rituals conducted there gradually shifted from genuine religious practice to ceremonies that served cosmic entities rather than human spiritual development. Hunters who participated in these corrupted practices found themselves more susceptible to blood-drunk syndrome and other forms of cosmic corruption. The hunting dreams that experienced hunters used to access advanced training and equipment became gateways through which cosmic forces could reach hunter consciousness more directly. The dream realm itself, rather than serving as a source of guidance and support, became a space where hunters could be subjected to cosmic manipulation and transformation without the protective limitations that normal reality provided. Gehrman, the first hunter, that's Gehrman, not German, found himself serving as an unwilling agent of cosmic forces that used his position within the hunter's dream to influence and corrupt subsequent generations of hunters. His role as mentor and guide became a mechanism for transmitting cosmic corruption disguised as professional training, while his apparent wisdom and experience provided legitimacy for practices that systematically violated cosmic beings. The hunt itself, rather than serving its original purpose of protecting Yanam from beast threats, became a ritual that served cosmic entities by providing them with regular offerings of violence and domination. The systematic slaughter of beasts created spiritual resonances that strengthened cosmic forces, while the hunter's absorption of blood echoes created networks of corruption that reached throughout the hunting community and beyond. Individual hunters experienced the curse's effects according to their level of involvement in cosmic violations and their susceptibility to corruption influences. Those who had participated in research expeditions or who wielded cosmic weapons found themselves subject to transformations that paralleled what had occurred in the hunter's nightmare. Others experienced more subtle changes that affected their judgment and moral sensibility without obvious external transformation. The social structures within the hunting community became mechanisms for spreading and reinforcing cosmic corruption. Senior hunters who had been compromised by Cuse effects mentored junior hunters using corrupted principles and practices, while the competitive dynamics within the hunting corps encouraged individual hunters to seek power from cosmic sources without regard for the consequences. The church hierarchy's increasing reliance on hunters to address problems that resulted from their own cosmic violations created feedback loops that accelerated the corruption process. Hunters were assigned missions that required additional cosmic violations, strengthening the forces that were working against the church, while making the hunters themselves more susceptible to corruption influences. The ultimate irony of the hunters' situation was that their dedication to protecting Yanam made them ideal agents for the cosmic forces that were working to destroy it. Their training, equipment, and institutional support were all derived from cosmic violations, while their professional success required them to engage in activities that strengthened the curse emanating from the fishing Hamlet. The better they served their protective function, the more they contributed to the cosmic justice that would eventually consume everything they were trying to protect. Chapter 13. The Nightmare's Eternal Punishment. Within the hunter's nightmare, the cosmic justice that the Orphan of Kos had designed reached its full expression through carefully crafted forms of eternal punishment that were precisely calibrated to address the specific violations that each inhabitant had committed. This was not random torment or arbitrary suffering, but a systematic implementation of cosmic law that operated according to principles that transcended mortal understanding of justice and rehabilitation. The nightmare's temporal structure ensured that punishment could not be escaped through simple endurance or adaptation. Time moved in cycles that prevented inhabitants from developing psychological defenses or finding relief through habituation to their circumstances. Past events were experienced as immediate present reality, ensuring that guilt and consequences remained psychologically fresh, regardless of how long inhabitants had been trapped within the nightmare. Ludwig the Accursed found himself experiencing punishment that reflected both his cosmic violations and his original noble intentions. The holy moonlight sword that had been his greatest asset became a source of constant torment, providing him with clarity about cosmic truth that made him fully aware of how his actions had served alien agendas rather than human welfare. His transformation into a beast was not permanent physical change, but a cyclic experience that forced him to relive his corruption repeatedly. The scholars who had originally violated Kos's remains experienced punishment that took the form of eternal research under conditions where they could never obtain the knowledge they sought. Their cosmic laboratory provided them with instruments that gave false readings, specimens that changed their nature when observed, and research objectives that shifted beyond their ability to comprehend. The scientific method that had been their professional foundation became a source of endless frustration and confusion. Dr. Adeline, whose leadership role made her particularly responsible for the original violations, found herself trapped in research scenarios where she was simultaneously investigator and subject. She experienced the same kind of analytical scrutiny that she had directed toward Kos, subjected to studies conducted by cosmic entities whose methods and purposes were as incomprehensible to her as hers had been to the Great Ones. She had violated. The hunters who had participated in subsequent cosmic violations experienced punishments that reflected their specific roles in perpetuating and expanding the curse. Those who had wielded cosmic weapons found themselves subject to the same kind of manipulation and control that they had exercised over cosmic beings. Warriors who had treated Great Ones as enemies to be defeated discovered themselves cast in scenarios where they were hunted by forces that possessed overwhelming advantages over them. Simon the Harrowed occupied a unique position within the nightmare's punishment structure. His role as witness and guide reflected both his guilt in failing to prevent violations and his potential for understanding and redemption. His punishment took the form of constant awareness of ongoing violations and their consequences, combined with the responsibility to help other inhabitants understand the nature of cosmic justice, while being unable to change or prevent the injustices he observed. The nightmare's geography reflected the psychological structure of cosmic punishment, with different areas corresponding to different types of violations and different approaches to justice. The twisted version of the fishing hamlet served as a courthouse, where inhabitants could confront the full implications of their actions, while the research areas forced scholars to experience the consequences of treating cosmic beings as research subjects. The blood river that flowed through the nightmare served as both barrier and pathway, preventing escape while providing a medium through which cosmic justice could reach all inhabitants. The blood's properties reflected the spiritual contamination that resulted from cosmic violations, creating an environment where normal physical laws were suspended and psychological consequences became physical reality. The nightmare's inhabitants were not entirely isolated from each other, but existed in a social structure that reflected the relationships and hierarchies that had enabled the original violations. Leaders who had authorized cosmic research found themselves responsible for the welfare of those they had led into corruption, while subordinates who had carried out violations experienced the consequences alongside their superiors. Communication within the nightmare was possible, but operated according to cosmic principles that ensured it served the purposes of justice rather than escape or evasion. Inhabitants could share their experiences and understanding, but could not collaborate to avoid or minimize their punishment. Information shared within the nightmare increased awareness of the scope and implications of cosmic violations, rather than providing strategies for escape. The nightmare's connection to normal reality allowed inhabitants to observe the ongoing consequences of their actions, but prevented them from taking effective action to address or mitigate those consequences. They could see the continuing spread of corruption throughout Yharnam and the expanding scope of cosmic violations, but their awareness only intensified their guilt and psychological torment without providing opportunities for redemption. The Orphan of Kos served as both architect and administrator of cosmic justice within the nightmare, but its presence was rarely direct or obvious. Instead, the young Great One's will was manifest through the nightmare's structure and logic, creating an environment where justice was implemented through the realm's fundamental nature rather than through explicit punishment or intervention. The nightmare's expansion capabilities ensured that new violators would be drawn in as their actions warranted cosmic punishment. The realm grew organically to accommodate new inhabitants, while maintaining the precise calibration of punishment that each individual deserved. This expansion was not random, but followed the networks of cause and effect that connected different violations and violators. The educational aspects of nightmare punishment were designed to provide inhabitants with understanding of cosmic perspectives and the implications of their actions. This was not knowledge that could be used to escape punishment, but awareness that made the punishment more meaningful and potentially transformative. Inhabitants gained insight into the nature of cosmic consciousness and the principles that governed relationships between different forms of existence. The possibility of redemption within the nightmare was real, but required genuine acknowledgement of violations and commitment to cosmic justice that transcended self-interest. Inhabitants who achieved such acknowledgement found that their punishment shifted toward forms that emphasize education and service rather than pure retribution, though they remained within the nightmare's structure. The nightmare's ultimate purpose was not simply to punish violations, but to serve as a deterrent that would prevent future cosmic violations and to provide a space where cosmic justice could be implemented according to principles that transcended mortal limitations. It represented the Orphan's attempt to create a system of cosmic law that would protect Great Ones from the kind of violations that had led to its mother's death. Chapter 14. The Orphan's Lament. At the heart of the hunter's nightmare, in the deepest chambers of cosmic justice, where time and space bent according to will rather than natural law, the Orphan of Cause maintained its vigil over the punishment of those who had violated its mother's remains. But the young Great One's role as administrator of cosmic justice was not without its own costs and complexities, for the implementation of eternal punishment required constant attention and emotional investment that took their toll even on cosmic consciousness. The Orphan's grief for its lost mother was not diminished by the passage of time or the satisfaction of revenge. If anything, the constant reminder of her death that was necessary to maintain the nightmare's punishment structure intensified rather than resolved the emotional trauma of her loss. Every cycle of punishment administered to the nightmare's inhabitants served as a reminder of the violations that had led to Kolkoz's death, ensuring that the Orphan's grief remained as fresh and overwhelming as it had been in the moment of first discovering her lifeless form. The young Great One's understanding of its mother's relationship with the fishing hamlet's villagers created additional layers of complexity within its emotional response to the cosmic violations it was punishing. Through its inherited memories and cosmic perception, the Orphan could see how Cause had loved and protected the mortal community, how she had found joy and purpose in serving as their guardian and protector. The fact that this benevolent relationship had ultimately led to her vulnerability and death created a profound ambivalence within the Orphan's consciousness. The cosmic perspective that allowed the Orphan to perceive the full network of cause and effect that had led to its mother's death also revealed the tragic irony embedded within the entire situation. Cause's love for mortal beings had made her accessible to those who would violate her. The implementation of cosmic justice through the nightmare realm required the Orphan to maintain constant awareness of the violations being punished, experiencing them repeatedly through the consciousness of the nightmare's inhabitants. This meant that the young Great One was forced to relive its mother's death and desecration through multiple perspectives, understanding not just the objective facts of what had occurred, but the subjective experiences of all participants, including the violators themselves. This comprehensive awareness created a form of psychological torture that paralleled what the nightmare's inhabitants experienced. Though the Orphan's cosmic nature provided it with resources for processing trauma that were not available to mortal consciousness, the young Great One's grief was not limited to personal loss, but encompassed a profound disillusionment with the nature of existence itself, a cosmic depression that resulted from understanding how love and trust could be met with violation and exploitation. The young Great One's observation of the nightmare's inhabitants over extended periods revealed aspects of mortal psychology that complicated its understanding of justice and responsibility. It could see how the scholars and hunters who had committed cosmic violations had been shaped by institutional pressures, cultural assumptions, and personal limitations that made their crimes seem rational or even inevitable from their own perspectives. This understanding did not excuse their actions, but created awareness of the systemic factors that made such violations likely. The Orphan's cosmic perception allowed it to observe the ongoing spread of corruption throughout Yharnam and the continuing cycle of violations that the curse was designed to punish. Each new violator who was drawn into the nightmare served as evidence that the justice being administered there was not preventing the kind of cosmic violations that had led to its mother's death. If anything, the curse seemed to be creating conditions that made additional violations more likely rather than less. The young Great One's attempts to communicate with its mother's spirit, hoping to find guidance or comfort in continued connection with her consciousness, met with only silence. Kos's death had been complete and final. Her consciousness dissolved into cosmic forces that could no longer maintain individual identity or awareness. The Orphan found itself truly alone in the universe, responsible for maintaining justice for violations against a being who could no longer participate in or approve of the punishment being administered on her behalf. The nightmare realm itself began to develop characteristics that reflected the Orphan's evolving understanding of its situation. Areas that had initially been designed purely for punishment began to exhibit features that suggested attempts at communication, education, and even reconciliation. The young Great One was unconsciously modifying the nightmare to serve functions beyond simple retribution, though these modifications were limited by the fundamental structure and purpose that had shaped the realm's original creation. The Orphan's observation of Simon the Harrowed and other inhabitants who showed signs of genuine understanding and remorse created possibilities for more complex forms of justice that went beyond pure punishment. The young Great One began to experiment with scenarios that emphasized education and service rather than retribution, though these experiments were constrained by its own need to honor its mother's memory through the administration of justice for her death. The cosmic loneliness that characterized the Orphan's existence was intensified by its role as administrator of justice, which required it to maintain emotional distance from the beings it was punishing, while simultaneously understanding their experiences with intimate detail. The young Great One found itself in the paradoxical position of being surrounded by consciousness while remaining fundamentally isolated from genuine companionship or understanding. The Orphan's lament was not expressed through conventional communication, but through the structure and atmosphere of the nightmare itself, creating an environment suffused with grief and longing that affected all inhabitants, regardless of their specific punishments. The young Great One's sorrow became part of the fundamental nature of cosmic justice, ensuring that punishment was administered not with cold detachment, but with the passionate intensity of personal loss. Chapter 15. The Cycle of Vengeance Eternal. As the hunter's nightmare reached its full development, and the cosmic curse emanating from the fishing Hamlet achieved maximum potency, the true scope of the Orphan's response to its mother's violation became apparent. What had begun as a focused punishment for specific violators had evolved into a comprehensive system of cosmic justice that would operate across time and space, ensuring that the principles violated by Kos's desecration would be protected through eternal vigilance and retribution. The nightmare realm had become self-sustaining, drawing energy not just from the guilt and suffering of its current inhabitants, but from the ongoing resonance of cosmic violations throughout the universe. Each new act of disrespect toward Great Ones, each instance of exploitation or analysis conducted without proper consent, each violation of the sacred relationships that should exist between different forms of consciousness, strengthened the nightmare's structure and expanded its reach. The curse's effects had spread far beyond Yharnam to influence cosmic relationships throughout multiple dimensions of existence. The institutional structures that had made the original violations possible found themselves subject to escalating forms of cosmic justice that operated according to the same principles that governed the nightmare realm. Academic institutions that pursued cosmic research without adequate ethical oversight discovered that their studies were producing increasingly dangerous and unpredictable results. Religious organizations that claimed authority over cosmic matters found their doctrines becoming corrupted and their practices serving cosmic forces rather than human spiritual development. The hunters, who continued to operate within Yunnan and beyond, found themselves caught in cycles of corruption and transformation that paralleled the experiences of the nightmare's inhabitants. Their weapons and techniques, derived from cosmic research that had been conducted through violation of Great Ones, became sources of ongoing corruption that affected not just individual hunters, but entire communities and regions. The blood ministration that had spread throughout Yunan's population served as a vector through which the curse could reach ordinary citizens who had never directly participated in cosmic violations. Recipients of blood treatment found themselves subject to transformations that reflected the same principles of cosmic justice, though in forms that were calibrated to their level of complicity and responsibility. The Orphan's observation of these expanding effects created a growing awareness of the limitations and unintended consequences of cosmic justice as it had been implemented. The punishment being administered was effective in addressing past violations, but was also creating conditions that made new violations more likely while reducing the possibility of genuine reconciliation between different forms of consciousness. The young Great One's attempts to modify the curse to address these unintended consequences were constrained by the fundamental principles that had shaped its creation. The cosmic justice emanating from the nightmare was designed to operate according to absolute principles that could not be easily adjusted or modified without undermining the entire structure. Any attempt to reduce punishment for past violations was interpreted by the cosmic system as weakness or corruption that required additional punishment to address. The nightmare's inhabitants, particularly those like Simon, who had achieved some level of understanding and acknowledgement of their violations, began to serve roles within the cosmic justice system that went beyond simple punishment. They became agents and interpreters of cosmic law, helping to identify new violations and explaining the principles of cosmic justice to newly arrived inhabitants. The expansion of the nightmare to accommodate new violators created opportunities for inhabitants to observe the systematic nature of cosmic violations and the institutional structures that made them possible. This comprehensive awareness allowed for more sophisticated analysis of the root causes of cosmic injustice and the development of more effective responses to address those causes. The Orphan's role as administrator of cosmic justice evolved to encompass not just punishment of past violations, but prevention of future ones, through the creation of cosmic law that would protect Great Ones from the kind of exploitation that had led to its mother's death. This expanded role required the young Great One to develop understanding of mortal psychology and institutional behavior that went far beyond its original focus on revenge and retribution. The nightmare's connection to normal reality allowed for ongoing communication between inhabitants and the world beyond, though this communication was limited to forms that served the purposes of cosmic justice rather than personal interest or escape. Inhabitants could serve as witnesses and teachers, sharing their understanding of cosmic law and the consequences of violations with those who were still capable of avoiding similar crimes. The ultimate purpose of the curse began to shift from pure punishment toward the creation of cosmic awareness that would make future violations impossible. The Orphan's understanding of its mother's benevolent relationship with mortal beings led to recognition that cosmic justice could serve constructive as well as punitive functions, protecting the possibility of genuine cooperation while preventing exploitation and violation. The tragedy of the situation remained that this educational function required the continuation of punishment and suffering for those who had already committed violations. The cosmic justice system that the Orphan had created was effective in its objectives, but operated according to principles that made forgiveness and reconciliation extremely difficult, while ensuring that the costs of cosmic violations would be remembered across generations. The cycle of vengeance that had begun with Kos's death and the Orphan's response to her violation had become a permanent feature of cosmic law, ensuring that the principles she had represented would be protected through eternal vigilance and retribution. The Nightmare Realm served as both prison and temple, punishing violations while honoring the memory of a great one whose love and trust had been met with analytical exploitation rather than reciprocal affection and respect. The fishing hamlet's curse had achieved its ultimate purpose, ensuring that the cosmic violation that had led to Koz's death would never be forgotten, and that similar violations would face consequences that operated across time and space. But the cost of this cosmic justice was the creation of a universe where trust between different forms of consciousness was diminished, and where the possibility of genuine cooperation was limited by fear of the terrible consequences that would follow any perceived violation of cosmic law. Conclusion: the eternal tide of sorrow. And so our journey through the tragic waters of the fishing hamlet comes to its close. Though the currents of sorrow and justice that we've explored continue to flow through the nightmare realms, where cosmic law is eternally administered, we've witnessed a story that encompasses the highest expressions of maternal love and the deepest depths of cosmic grief. A narrative that reveals how the violation of sacred trust can create consequences that echo across dimensions and generations. The tale of Koz and her orphan serves as both tragedy and warning, illustrating how the pursuit of knowledge without wisdom, power without responsibility, and progress without respect for the sacred can transform blessing into curse and love into vengeance. The scholars of Byrgenwerth approached cosmic mysteries with the cold detachment of academic inquiry, failing to understand that the beings they studied were not mere research subjects, but conscious entities deserving of respect and consideration. The fishing hamlet's peaceful relationship with their cosmic protector demonstrated the possibility of genuine cooperation between mortal and cosmic consciousness, a symbiotic tensionship that benefited both parties, while honoring the fundamental differences that separated their forms of existence. But this benevolent relationship also created the vulnerability that allowed Koz to be violated by those who approached her with analytical rather than respectful intentions. The orphan's response to its mother's desecration reveals the terrible power of cosmic grief and the way that love transformed by violation can become a force for justice that transcends conventional limitations of time and space. The hunter's nightmare that emerged from the young Great One's rage serves as both prison and courtroom, administering punishment that is precisely calibrated to address the specific violations that each inhabitant committed. The curse that spread throughout Johannem and beyond illustrates how cosmic injustice creates consequences that affect entire civilizations and institutional structures. The healing church's corruption, the hunter's blood-drunk madness, and the beast scourge that consumed the city all reflected the operation of cosmic law that demanded accountability for violations against great ones. Simon the Harrod's role as witness and guide within the nightmare demonstrates the possibility of understanding and acknowledgement, even within structures of cosmic punishment. His presence suggests that cosmic justice is not merely retributive, but potentially educational, offering opportunities for growth and awareness to those who are capable of genuine remorse and understanding. The ultimate tragedy of the fishing hamlet's story lies in its demonstration of how violations of cosmic law create cycles of mistrust and fear that diminish the possibility of genuine cooperation between different forms of consciousness. The curse that protects great ones from future violations also isolates them from the kind of loving relationships that gave Koz's existence meaning and purpose. Yet within this tragedy lies a profound understanding of the sacred nature of consciousness and the importance of approaching cosmic mysteries with reverence rather than merely analytical detachment. The orphan's dedication to honoring its mother's memory through the administration of cosmic justice reflects a cosmic perspective that values relationship and respect over knowledge and power. The nightmare realm that serves as the curse's primary manifestation operates according to principles that challenge conventional understanding of justice and rehabilitation. Its eternal nature reflects cosmic awareness that some violations create damage that cannot be easily repaired, while its educational aspects suggest that even cosmic punishment can serve constructive purposes when properly understood and accepted. The story of the fishing Hamlet ultimately asks us to consider fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness, the ethics of research and exploration, and the responsibilities that come with seeking knowledge about beings whose existence transcends our normal categories of understanding. It challenges us to approach cosmic mysteries not as problems to be solved, but as relationships to be cultivated with appropriate respect and humility. The curse that emanates from the orphan's grief serves as a reminder that love and trust, once violated, can become sources of justice that operate according to principles that transcend mortal understanding of cause and effect. The cosmic forces that protect great ones from exploitation reflect a universe where consciousness itself is sacred and where violations of that sacredness create consequences that echo across time and space. As we conclude this exploration of one of Bloodborne's most profound and tragic stories, we're left with an understanding of how the pursuit of knowledge and power can transform blessing into curse when conducted without proper respect for the consciousness and dignity of those being studied. The fishing Hamlet's fate serves as both warning and lament, illustrating the terrible costs of treating sacred relationships as research opportunities. The eternal tide of sorrow that flows through the nightmare realms where cosmic justice is administered reminds us that some wounds to the fabric of existence cannot be healed through conventional means. But it also suggests that even cosmic grief can serve constructive purposes when it leads to the protection of consciousness and the prevention of future violations. In the end, the story of Coles and her orphan challenges us to consider how we approach mysteries that transcend our understanding, encouraging us to seek wisdom alongside knowledge and to remember that true progress comes not through exploitation, but through respect for the sacred nature of consciousness in all its forms. The waves still crash against the shores of the fishing hamlet in realms where time moves according to cosmic rather than terrestrial cycles, carrying with them the echoes of ancient love and loss, grief and justice, violation and vengeance. In those eternal tides, we find both warning and wisdom about the price of treating the sacred as merely subject matter for academic inquiry. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of gaming's most profound explorations of love, loss, and cosmic justice. The story of the fishing hamlet reminds us that even in our darkest nightmares, there are truths worth understanding and relationships worth honoring. May your own explorations of cosmic mysteries be guided by respect for the consciousness you encounter, and may you find wisdom in the tragic beauty of stories that reveal the sacred nature of existence itself. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the deepest waters of the cosmos, love and justice flow together in currents that connect all consciousness across time and space.